So there's something you need to be aware of. I'm sure I'm not going to be the only person to tell you this. I see it popping up all over the place in increasing frequency. And that is because the deadline is on the 9th of February, 2021. And that is the Gambling Commission have a consultation out there at the moment for which they're inviting views, your views, as well as mine and everybody else within the industry, on how they manage affordability. And they're basically, what I would do is put a link in the description below and you can click on it. They're asking you to do a quick survey to get your views on how should they manage the affordability situation in gambling, which I shall go on to explain in a second. But click on the link, submit the survey. You can submit it anonymously. I suggest if you make it with a proper email and stuff, then that carries more credibility with them, I should imagine. And basically they will be looking at all of that and trying to understand what they think will and won't work within the market as far as affordability goes. And when we're talking about affordability, what we're saying here is how do you stop people from gambling with money that they can't afford to lose? And ultimately, that's one of the problems that the gambling industry has, is people get over enthusiastic. They gamble more than they can lose, and then they chase losses, and it all spirals out of control. So the Gambling Commission is looking at this particular area and saying, is there a way that we could effectively cap how much money people can lose? And there was, I can't remember specifically where it came from. I'm not convinced that it actually came from the Gambling Commission itself. I'm sure it came from a lobby group or something that was proposing maybe we should actually set the limit at like £100 a month or something. You know, if you lose more than £100, you can no longer bet. But it's funny when you look at this, because if you were attempting to do something like that, you would actually create more losers than if you just left that situation a bit more open-ended or a bigger loss limit. It shows a complete misunderstanding of the way that things work. Now, part of this is generated by when you say gambling, that could encompass all manner of things. It could be sports bet, it could be the lottery and scratch cards, it could be bingo, online casinos. Now, that sector of the gambling industry I loathe. I really do not like it, because I can see why you could go to a casino, have a drink and be with some friends and, you know, throw a few balls around a wheel or whatever. You know, there's the sense of entertainment in that. But why would you do it online? There's almost no reason to do it online other than filling up the bank accounts of the provider at the other end. I've never understood that, but it is quite a big part of the industry. But I don't see any material gain for that. If you're watching a football match and you're a Brighton or a Burnley fan, and you look at the odds at 35 or 40 to 1 to get a 1-0 win at Liverpool, you may have a cheeky tenner on that. Or maybe you'll even hedge your bets, having a few quid on Liverpool. But whatever you do, you're interacting, there's something going on there. But also there's an element of skill, as I have proven over the last 20 years. If you know what you're doing, then you can do some really interesting things. Now, I'm really careful about this because I don't go out and produce a video saying, hey, make risk-free income from betting, just follow this simple method, because I can't do that, because it doesn't work like that. And, you also therefore have this issue within the industry of people tipping or saying that they're a professional gambler or follow me. And then you have copy bet sites and stuff like that. It's quite a complex situation. But what I'm trying to say here is that, there are many different facets. Some things, so if you put a loss limit, say, for example, on a bingo site, and, they were doing a quid a card or something, or a quid a spin on a online slots machine, then, when that bank evaporates, then that's it, because it's going to be on a downward curve all of the time. But when you look at sports betting, it's much more variable. And so you've got to have different legislation, different things for different types of gambling. Otherwise, it will not work. And how are you going to, surely the lottery and scratch cards need to be included in something like this as well. How are you going to manage that? And if you look at, I often bring up this chart on favourites that show you the variability of favourites. If you bet on the favourite, over the very, very long term, you more or less break even. But over the short term, it swings up and down all over the place. So the problem, if you put a loss limit in, is that you will actually hit that loss limit at several points over a period of time. And therefore, actually, you would hit that loss limit very frequently, and you would generate more losers because they hit one of those drawdowns at some point, quick, and that would just knock them out of the game. So you actually end up getting significantly more losers than you would do if you just left it open-ended and they broke even over a longer period of time. So I think it's completely unenforceable, certainly on sports betting. But maybe that would work on casino or something along those lines. But so I think there are sort of many issues there. But in terms of imposing loss limits, that's an issue. In terms of imposing additional checks, in terms of affordability, how does that work really? There are actually procedures in place already. So if you sign up to a bookmaker, and especially a betting exchange, you have the KYC and AML procedures. So KYC is know your customer. You have to identify that this person exists and that they are real and that there's a funding source attached to their account. And the AML procedure, anti-money laundering, is one of the reasons that you see accounts being closed or whatever. It could be one of these two reasons. And that is because the pressure is built on bookmakers and exchanges to make sure that they are compliant with both of these requirements. And if they're not requirement, then it's better for them to close the account than run foul of the regulators. But both those procedures are there to A, make sure that they can identify the customer, and B, make sure that, if a large amount appears in an account, that the customer has successfully, the source of funds to be able to do that. So those procedures are actually in place already, much more rigorously enforced on things like betting exchange than they are with some bookmakers, but bookmakers do enforce them as well. But that's quite a complicated area. And if you look at the FCA, the Financial Conduct Authority, they regulate spread betting CFD firms on financial markets. They have exactly the same procedures in place. But when you sign up for an account there, then you do have to go through quite a number of checks and qualify yourself as a professional investor and submit that criteria before you can do anything. So those sort of checks exist there as well. But always the problem you have with over-regulation and compliance with all of these things is that all it does is change the behavior of people. It doesn't actually solve the problem. So I can give you a clear example here. In my various trips to the US, I'd always be fascinated by the US betting markets while I was there. And I would often be in some bar somewhere at 3 a.m., 4 a.m. UK time. And there would be some sport on. So it was inevitably I would just get my smartphone or something out and have a quick look at the Betfair markets. And they were flooded with liquidity. I couldn't place a bet on Betfair because I was in a restricted area. But when you actually look at the markets, you could see that there was loads of money going through the markets. And you're sort of thinking, well, it must be somebody in this time zone that is doing it. So I became fascinated by who was doing it and what was the market for it and how was that happening and stuff like that. But what I discovered in the US was that, well, nobody in the US could actually place a bet. They could in Canada. And as a consequence, anybody that was in the US that wanted to trade or place bets on betting exchanges would simply domicile themselves in Canada one way or another. And then they could actively trade those markets because, these markets were very liquid. But then Paddy Power took over Betfair, and that created a problem because Paddy Power had incumbent business in Canada that they didn't want to disrupt or disturb through the exchange. So they basically binned the exchange in Canada. So what do you think happened next? Did that business just evaporate or did it move somewhere else? Well, I did a little video where I actually stood next to the Mexican border. On one side, we have drugs, prostitution, illegal gambling, and on the other side, we have Mexico. And the point of doing this particular video was to highlight this problem because all of the business that should have been in the US actually ended up in Canada, and when Canada was closed, it ended up in Mexico. So that's the problem. Regulation on these sort of markets is like trying to squash jelly. You never succeed in stamping on it. It just spills out all over the place. And that is always the problem because the US never regulated properly for exchanges So people just in the country just found ways to get around it. And that's what happens when you become too officious and the regulation becomes too heavy-handed. You lose control of the market, you lose control of the tax revenue. So there has to be a happy medium. There has to be something that will allow all of that to sort of join up together. And I think the problem with affordability checks is that people will find a way around it, or they will, I'm not sure that that is actually the solution, and I'm not sure that loss limits are the solution, because that would end up, especially on sports markets, creating more losers, not in fact creating less losers, certainly not in quantity terms, and probably not in volume terms either. So what is the solution? Well, I think there are probably a number of ways that you could move forward. I think you need tighter regulation probably on the affiliate side of things, because bookmakers have to adhere to certain code, but a lot of affiliates don't. That has tightened up a bit more, but I see a lot of abuse of that all of the time. But also, I think that what you're looking for is a behavioural change in the way that people gamble. And when you look at Betfair, you can go on to Betfair. I can get my lifetime P&L, my lifetime commission, how much I've made in the last week, month, 3 months, and that's all available to me. And I think that if you were to change some of the regulation, if you look at what the FCA did on spread betting and CFDs, they basically force those companies to actually publish how many people lose when they're using their services. And the numbers are quite high. So if when you log in, in all promotional material, you sort of say X number of people lose, they only do it over 1 year. I think they should do it over 1 and 5 or something like that. I think that would be much more telling. Then you're basically saying to people, look, if you bet on this thing, you are going to lose, or there's a very good chance that you're going to lose. Do you wish to proceed? That's the basis on which you're doing. So you're changing the behavior of people rather than just regulating or, putting red tape in front of it. But also, if you actually showed people what their lifetime P&L is, surely that would make them think twice about having to, to go in and, that a lot of people lose. You log in and the first thing you see is how much you've lost over the last 4 or 5 years or something. That's surely going to make you think twice, isn't it? People who have a problem are going to look at that and have to wake up to the fact that they saw that and continued. And if you look at exchanges, they have exposure limits in place. Okay, the exposure limit is only for the day, but that exposure limit, I think, probably stops a lot of activity spilling out and going above and beyond what could be a major problem. You have to consciously raise that limit in order to be able to get to that extreme. And there are checks and processes in place around that already. So I think actually betting exchanges are probably one of the best places to go. And I think most of the problem with this particular proposal or consultation is it's too broad a brush. It encompasses many different aspects of gambling, isn't specific enough, and different gambling has different problems. Can you imagine somebody logging into their account who's been playing an online casino, and it says 100% of people lose if they play this casino, and you've lost 50 grand. Do you want to continue? I think they may have to reappraise rather rapidly their approach to that particular game. So yeah, I'm not pretending that I know everything and can answer all questions, but those are some of my views on it. And I think you should give your views on it to the Gambling Commission, whatever they are. And if you click on that link and submit the survey before the 9th of February, you'll be able to do that. You'll be able to have some sort of level of influence, or at least feel like you've done something to put your views across to the Gambling Commission. I think there is another video on this, to be honest. And if you've got some thoughts on some of the stuff that I said, then let me know. And I will produce that video, because we have a broader sort of thing to look at on this particular topic. But yeah, click on that link, submit your views by the 9th of February, and don't regret not having a chance to put forward whatever your opinion is. That's my opinion. Whether you agree with it or not, let me know. And I look forward to seeing you on the next video.